fellas. No, I don't need Fetty. It's all good. Those are the Hondos.
Yeah.
Watch your step here. Hey, we gotta get going. I've been outed. Start moving now. Don't look back. Don't look back. He just heard me. He just saw me. I heard him say Jonathan Choe. That's Jonathan Choe. There's an out here on the right.
America, the man who had to run when they said his name, Jonathan Choe. He goes into these parks alone because nobody obviously wants to go with him. His words, not mine. The woman who was with him that day is DELACRUZ. She just won a Washington Court of Appeals ruling 6 weeks ago that forced the city of Seattle to hand over records that they have been sitting on for 3 years. Seattle has a new mayor, Katie Wilson, the basement dweller. NPR called her Seattle's first openly socialist mayor. 4 months in, her entire campaign was built on one specific commitment to her activist base, that she would end sweeps, the encampment removals, the enforcement. She called them cruel and counterproductive. She promised that they would stop. She's running the sweeps, just not where the cameras are pointed. And the park that Jonathan Choe had to run out of sits in a neighborhood that appears in Seattle's police department case documents on their own public-facing website as a Honduran organized drug corridor for 17 years, published, accessible. And while every news station in Seattle ran the footage of what's happening in that park, and not one of them went to the document that their own city police department wrote. The records DELACRUZ's lawsuit just peered open, the ones that the city sat on for 3 years, are sitting in an archive that Seattle politicians are hoping that nobody opens.
I was in North Beacon Hill again today, touring Lewis Park, Dr. Jose Rizal Park, and Sturgus Park, and it is as bad as ever. In fact, I've never seen it this bad in years. The pavilion has been destroyed. The bus shelter has been destroyed. The dog park is unsafe. There's foil and needles and people suffering, folded over from fentanyl, and people passed out in front of the children's playground, blocking the scenic view for all to enjoy.
What is up, guys? TYSON DELACRUZ here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. I'm about to show you the 17-year-old document sitting in Seattle's own police department website that every political reporter in this city has been conveniently walking past, and I tracked it down pretty easily myself. Before the analysis and we dive into this video, I want to give a direct shout out to DELACRUZ and Jonathan Choe. Everything that follows what I'm about to say exists because they're on the ground reporting. Jonathan Choe walks in the parks alone because of his words. Who's gonna come with me? Brandy just won a court case to force the city to hand over documents that it actually buried. This channel, me, and everybody watching sees the work, so I wanted to give a huge kudos to them, and you should give them both a follow. Now, the operation that we're documenting in plain terms here, we're talking about 3 parks in Seattle, all run the same product. The drug here is fentanyl. On the street, it's called Fenty, or the blues, whatever. It comes in little tiny pills.
The drug of choice remains fentanyl, also known on the street as Fetty or blues. These tiny pills being smoked on sheets of foil now go for as little as $2 a pop.
All of us have Narcan.
Health officials say it's the primary driver behind King County's record drug overdose deaths last year.
At $2 a pill, the business model doesn't obviously need a store here. It needs a park where there's no consequences for actually being there and distributing the drugs. King County's overdose record is not a statistical noise statement here. It is accessible supply, meaning the removed enforcement in Seattle, documented in the same health data that the city cites when describing the crisis and simultaneously sustaining it.
That's the biggest concentration of active drug use I've seen in 15 years in Seattle. In terms of active actually using in the moment.
Not only drug use, you had dealers offer me.
Twice,
And you heard it.
yeah.
You need some? You need some? You need any? And those are the Hondurans.
Yeah.
This place is out of sight, out of mind. It's perfect.
15 years, every encampment, every tent city, every crisis point this city has produced since 2009. When she says the specific location of Lewis Park is a deliberate operational choice, chosen because it's invisible from the street, accessible only through a hidden path, apparently, where the dealers can scoot on in, scoot on out. They see arrivals before anybody inside can be seen. That is not commentary. That is obviously strategical placement here. That is forensic context for somebody who's been in every corner of this city and has tried to manage. And she's telling you specifically that this corner has been left alone. Now, here's the part that changes what you just watched. The park that Jonathan Choe had to run out of sits in the same corridor that appears on the Seattle Police Department case document on their own public website. For 17 years, Seattle Police Department have documented the Honduran organized drug network operating in this specific stretch of Belltown and North Beacon Hill. It's actually published. You guys can check it out. Accessible to any reporter who opens up their browser or you who opens up the browser. While every station in Seattle runs the Lewis Park footage, nobody ran that document alongside it. And 4 months ago, Katie Wilson's police chief sent every officer in the department a New Year's email.
Happens when you have policies that prevent police from essentially doing their job. They can't arrest anybody. They can't hold people accountable for crimes. And when you don't stop the little stuff, it develops into big stuff. You don't stop things like shoplifting. Well, guess what? Those people are going to sell their ill-gotten gains for drugs. And then when you allow open-air drug use, people are going to use drugs on the street. And then when you allow things like that, then you open up the market for things like sex trafficking and prostitution.
We talked about it before on this channel. January 1st, 2026, day one of Katie Wilson's administration. Chief Barnes sent that to every officer in the department and called it a Happy New Year's message. Not some cases, not some low-level possession. The word all is in the email. When the community groups called this decriminalization and Wilson's office called it, quote unquote, misinformation, the written instruction from her own police chief is documented in that area, which resolves that dispute. The document obviously wins here. LEAD, L-E-A-D, is what Wilson's administration calls the alternative. Before we go any further, what LEAD actually is in plain layman's terms, because the diversion program or diversity, equity, inclusion category that it's placed in sounds like a treatment, and it's not.
Hi, good morning, Council. My name's Andrea Suarez, founder of We Heart Seattle. I'm here to talk about the harm of possession in our community. We've picked up hundreds of thousands of needles and hundreds of thousands of pieces of foil that our county hand out to drug addicts. I think that really just speaks to the drug-friendly and enabling culture we have. There's other major cities that are starting to ban handing that out, especially tent side, without enrolling in programs. So there's some little adjustments we could make to really shift from a drug-friendly city to one where we are a recovery-first city. So there's a very predatory element out there in terms of the culture. When we talk about why it never gets better, Councilman Kettle, it's because we have an inflow crisis. We don't have anything like Proposition F, which San Francisco has. It says if you're going to come to Seattle, you need to pass a drug test for illegal substances before you get your food stamp card and your ABT card. Little things like that are what other major cities and Democratic run cities are doing to kind of create the not drug-friendly culture. My mantra is we have very cheap drugs and free crime, and that's what's creating the havoc we see in our community.
65,000 volunteer hours, 2 million pounds of trash cleared, hundreds of people helped off the streets. Andrea Suarez has the standing to tell you what works and obviously what doesn't work. The program that every drug arrest in Seattle is now being routed into by written policy provides the pipes and the oil in a climate-controlled building. Totally makes sense, right? That is not a path off fentanyl, you guys. That is a path on continuing fentanyl in a supervised area. That is a city paying for the infrastructure of addiction and addicts with your tax dollars, while the Court of Appeals is releasing records of how long that they've known about the corner that they refuse to actually clear. Make it make sense, you guys. Wilson's campaign was specific. The people who elected her built her careers on fighting encampment sweeps. She agreed with all of them publicly, repeatedly, on camera, over and over again. And obviously, because it's Seattle, Katie, the basement dweller, she won the election. Within 4 months, her administration is conducting sweeps. This is obvious because the homeless crisis in Seattle is absolutely insane. In Greenwood, the city sent a team to Rizal Park, and they sent it to that park over and over and over again.
The mayor's office responding to Como News, explaining the city's outreach team has gone to Rizal Park 18 times since February 1st, connecting 2 people to shelters, with 1 waiting on a referral to a tiny home village. They add that the city's unified care team has worked with parking enforcement to make RVs move and clean up debris. But residents say their issue is not about housing.
The city, I believe, needs to change their policy on how they deal with drugs.
Valerie Barber Axthelm has daughters that are 3 years old and 7 months old.
We've been changing our walking route recently just due to the activity at the park.
She says she completely supports the city doing outreach for services, but stresses there must be consequences for those abusing public spaces.
Crack down on drug sales because that's hurting everybody in our city. That's hurting our neighbors, that's hurting the people selling drugs, that's hurting the people using drugs.
Get this, you guys, the mayor's office answered with a visit tally. That is the entire transaction. Wilson learned the trick that every Seattle mayor before her absolutely learned. Sweep where the cameras are calling, issue a statement about outreach where there isn't actually any. Lewis Park has no closure order on it, and no Seattle PD operation underway, no statement from the mayor's office, just Honduras drug dealers. The foil, the 17-year operational history on the city's own published website.
I heard a couple people talk about tiny houses and wraparound services. Last time I went into a tiny house, I saw a designated tiny house to use fentanyl. So help me understand how we're stabilizing somebody inside a tiny house village when there's a tiny house designated to smoke fentanyl.
6 years, that's how long Suarez has been standing in those parks, watching the inflow and what the services actually draw. The footage from Seattle's homeless crisis shows what's been arriving in New York City, Louisiana, Alaska, Guatemala, people drawn by the service infrastructure and low consequence environment. This is what happens. The January 1st Barnes email upgraded the signal, and the officers being asked to implement the referral. The union president assessed on record a complete waste of time. The federal fix, local reversal, every time a local administration removes consequences through policy, the diversion, the non-arrest, the no prosecution signal, any enforcement operating in that opposite direction pushes against the current of the city that is deliberately generating it. Guys, you can't remove rock bottom, then wonder why the other side keeps hitting it. Seattle has been running this pattern longer than the most cities in the entire country. 17 years of documented operations of this capacity. 17 years of a document, 4 months of a new mayor, the same corner, the same operation. America, here's what nobody has added up since Brandy Cruz's court appeal ruling 6 weeks ago. The record Seattle held for 3 years, the ones that the court orders released, covered the period when the city's leadership was actively managing the gap between what it said publicly and what it knew operationally about these parks. The timeline and the 17 years that Seattle Police Department documentation of the Honduran drug dealer corridor in Belltown are not two different stories. They're the same question asked in two different documents. What did the city know, and what did they decide to do when they actually knew it? The record answered the first. The Lewis Park footage answers the second. Every future Katie Wilson sweep will be weighed against the promise she made to the activists who actually put her in office. Every park left to the same corner while the cameras pointed elsewhere will be weighted against the footage that Jonathan Choe and Brandy Cruz produced alone. The mayor can't unsay the campaign. The dealers can't unsay his name. Both are now on record. This is the same playbook this channel has documented from Houston to Chicago to California. Build the policy, issue the statement, and leave the corner for the Hondurans. Wilson ran against the sweeps. She's running the sweeps, and Belltown still belongs to the Hondurans. When Brandy Cruz's next document release comes from the Court of Appeals victory, and more is coming out, obviously, I'll cover it as soon as it gets dropped, and I'll place the coming up video at the end of this video. It is the full story on how Seattle built the service infrastructure that removed rock bottom equation from Andrea Suarez she's been fighting since 2009. Every piece of that story connects to what you just watched. Check it out after this one, and let me know what you guys think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.